Go ahead, Drew.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. I apologize for last week. I wasn't able to be here, but again, I'm glad to continue now. So just to recap for a few seconds of what we were doing last time to get back into the flow. So the topic we were discussing was the destiny of Klal Yisrael, the destiny of each individual Jew. Olam Haba, Tchias HaMesim, Mashiach. How do all these things, how practically are these things going to happen, and what are the significance of these events? So last time we were talking about the opinion of the Rambam and the opinion of all the Rishonim that follow in that world of in that way of philosophy. And just very quickly, what we said is that in the view of the Rambam, the physical body and the whole physical world is really there's nothing more to the human body than just being a vehicle to function, to live, to move around, and so on. There's nothing deeply mystical about it. There's nothing greatly, significant about the body. If anything, physical life in the body is nothing but a hindrance to the neshama. And therefore, in the Rambam's view, Olam Haba, which is the destiny of Klal Yisrael, which is the ultimate goal, says the Rambam, Olam Haba is after a person passes away. After a person passes away and his body and soul separate, and the soul is then able to go back into Shemayim, into what we colloquially call Gan Eden, that's Olam Haba. That's Olam Haba. That's what the neshama is longing for. That's what every Jew wants to happen. And the Rambam just explained that, and therefore Tchias HaMesim in the Rambam's view is not the goal. That's not the destiny. That's not the purpose of creation to get the resurrection of the dead. The Rambam just clarified that the purpose of Tchias HaMesim is to allow those people that suffered during their lifetime, that were unable because of outside factors to really accomplish what they needed to accomplish and to learn what they needed to learn and so on. So Hashem will give them a second life during the time period of Mashiach, which is going to be a time period without sickness, without any problems, without any issues of parnasa and so on, to allow these people to accomplish and to fulfill all their potential. And then they will pass away and they'll go into Olam Haba. They'll go into Olam Haba again. That is the perspective of the Rambam. Just by the way, to clarify one thing, I remember last time someone asked whether or not the lifespan during that second lifetime, according to the Rambam, is going to be very long, very short, and so on. So the truth is, I looked into it a little bit more. The Rambam writes in a letter that he sent out discussing this issue. In that letter, he throws in very, very quickly that he believes the lifespan during that time period will, generally speaking, be relatively long. There will be exceptions to the rule, obviously, but generally speaking, people will have a longer life during that second lifetime of Tchias HaMesim, during the times of Mashiach. That is the worldview of the Rambam. That's the perspective of the Rambam. However, so now what we're going to discuss now is the opinion of the Ramban. I say the Ramban, but the truth is it's the opinion of all the Mekubalim. All the Mekubalim, just the head of the Mekubalim, I guess you could say, is the Ramban. The opinion of the Ramban is as follows. He has a very, very big problem with the Rambam, a number of big problems. Some of his questions, some of his problems in the Rambam are small, and others are very, very significant. One issue he raises with the Rambam, for example, is that we find in the Gemara many, many times the following nusach, the following, vernacular. Chazal say that after a certain person dies, for example, a certain tzaddik, so the nusach in the Gemara very often is that this person is mezuman l'chai olam haba, is prepared to go to olam haba. So ask the Ramban, if a person passes away and that's Olam Haba, what does it mean after the person dies? Now you're prepared to go to Olam Haba. You're in Olam Haba. That's Olam Haba. So that's one, again, it's a small critique, but that's one problem he has on the Rambam. The other much more significant problem that he has on the Rambam is the following. Even a very simplistic learning of Chumash in Parshas Bereishis, we get the impression that if it wasn't for the sin of Adam Rishon, if it wasn't for him eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, he would have lived forever, right? There's no such thing as death in the world. That's simply what it says in Chumash. Only because he sinned is there such a thing as death. So I asked the Ramban a very, very fundamental question on the Rambam. If in the Rambam's view, Olam Haba means soul without body, right? And the body is nothing but a hindrance to the power of the neshama, then how is it possible that if it wasn't for the sin, Adam would have lived forever? How would Adam have ever experienced Olam Haba? How would all of humanity have ever experienced Olam Haba if it wasn't for the sin? So says the Ramban, so it must be, therefore says the Ramban, and this is the approach that's been accepted by all the Mekubalim throughout all the generations. that the purpose of creation, the end zone, the goal, the destiny of every single one of us, and collectively the Jewish people, is not soul without body. Is not soul without body. The ultimate purpose of creation, the ultimate goal where we want to head, is Chiyas HaMesim, is the resurrection of the dead. Soul and body united together in a perfected state, and in that state of soul and body together, with an unbelievable attachment to Hashem. Just to clarify, the Ramchal in his Sefer Derech Hashem talks about this at great length. And this, again, like I said, this is true by all the Mekabalim, the Maral, and the Sefer Kabbalah, and Chassidus. This is what they all hold. Is that the body, physical life, is not chas v'shalom. It's not a hindrance. It's not a hindrance to the neshama. It's not a hindrance to the neshama. The way it should be in the perfected state, in the world the way it should have been before the sin and after Chiyas HaMesim, is that the light of the neshama will be able to penetrate the body, and the body will become elevated to become one with the soul. And both then body and soul together will experience an attachment to Hashem that's greater than the soul could have experienced by itself. This is something that we're going to have to spend time a little bit more to understand. How is it possible that the physical body could somehow help the neshama in attaching itself to Hashem? But this is what the Mekabalim say, that the body is not just a vehicle to allow movement, to allow a person to get from point A to point B. The body is a mystical entity. Physical life has very great spiritual significance to it, and if it's elevated properly, if the soul is able to penetrate the body in a proper, healthy way, then they both come together in unbelievable unity, and an unbelievable dveikus to Hashem. The example, by the way, that's given, and again, this is something we're going to have to work through this a little bit later on. But the example that's given by the Baal Tan, he gave the following mashal. He said, let's say you have a person that wants to climb a mountain. So there's only the human being is limited with his physical body. There's only so much a man's legs can get him. So, but a horse, however, or a mule is very, very strong physically. It's able to get to the top of the mountain. But the horse by itself is crazy. It's completely untamed. It's wild. It can't be controlled. So when the person trains the horse or trains the mule and harnesses the mule and rides the mule to the top of the mountain, so when the human being and that animal come together, they're now able to accomplish something that each one of them on their own wasn't able to do. The person on his own, as great as the intellect and the superior knowledge of the person, he can't climb to the top of the mountain. And the animal could climb to the top of the mountain, but when it's not controlled by the human being, it's completely chaotic and completely wild. But when the two come together in perfect harmony, and the human being is able to control and harness the animal to be productive, then the place that they can reach together is way beyond anywhere that each one of them could have gone by themselves. Says the Baal Tan, that's exactly the relationship between the body and the soul. It's true that the soul is an unbelievably spiritual being, but the level that it can reach in attachment to Hashem by itself is nowhere near the level it can reach in attachment to Hashem when it's able to harness and infuse the body with its holiness. This is the opinion of the Mekabalim, and therefore, the opinion of the Mekabalim is as follows: that after a person passes away, and the body and soul are separated, the neshama goes, obviously without the body, the neshama goes to Shemaim in a place that's called Olam HaNeshamas, the world of souls. In common terms, we call this Gan Eden as well, but this is a spiritual place called Olam HaNeshamas, the world of souls. And the neshama up there, despite the fact that it's attached to Hashem and it's learning and it's like we find in Chazal a concept of the Yeshivah Shamayla, there's a base medrash in Shemaim and so on. The neshama is flying in heaven and it's unbelievably happy in heaven. However, the neshama is waiting and chalishing to the day where it's going to be able to come back down into this world after the resurrection of the dead and unite with that body and now connect to Hashem in an unbelievably deep way. To explain this a little bit more, just to give a little bit, again, it's a very, very deep opinion, but before the sin of Adam Rishon, the body that Hashem made was able to come together with the neshama in a very, very harmonious way, like I'm saying over here. Before the sin, the body was able to become uplifted by the neshama to such an extent where they both together would have experienced an unbelievable attachment to Hashem. But because of the sin of Adam Rishon, because of the terrible, downgrade that the entire planet went through by that sin, so the physical bodies that we have right now and the physical world that we have right now as great as many mitzvahs that a person can do, and as holy as a person can become. But ultimately speaking, the Mekubalim say it's impossible for the body right now, in the physical state that we have right now, it's impossible for that body to become united with the neshama to the extent that it could have been united before the sin. And therefore, this is why there's such a thing as death. The purpose of death is to separate the body and soul. The body goes into the ground and is broken down, and it's reconstituted when the time comes of Tchias HaMesim. The body will be reconstituted in the form of Adam Rishon before the sin, in such a way where the soul will then be able to re-enter the body, and they'll become united once again and uplifted to that level of Adam Rishon before the sin. So, in other words, in the perspective of the Mekubalim, the body is not something that's a hindrance to the neshama. It might be true that that in our lifetimes, with our Yetzirahs, with our difficulties, it feels that way. It feels that the body is something that holds the neshama back, and to a certain extent, it is true in our life. But however, say the Mekubalim, in the destiny of Klal Yisrael, in the ultimate purpose of where we're going and where we're heading, the body is not a hindrance. The body is not a hindrance at all. The body is something that will, when it's perfected, when it's uplifted, when it's fixed by Tchias HaMesim, that body will become a vehicle to allow the neshama to reach heights that it can't even imagine it could reach right now. That's what the Mekubalim say. So the process of the human being is as follows. We're born into this lifetime with a body that's limited, with a body that's very, very coarse, with a Yitzhar that's very, very difficult, and we're limited with what our bodies can do right now. So we do mitzvahs, we do everything we can in order to strengthen our neshama, in order to build a spiritual reservoir for our neshama, and to uplift the physical body as well a little bit. But ultimately speaking, a person passes away. And when a person passes away, the body that we have right now is broken down. It's broken down. And the neshama that we have goes into Shemayim, and it's attaching itself to Hashem, and it's waiting. And what it's waiting for is that day of Tchias HaMesim, which is going to be a time where Hashem is going to rebuild our bodies in that old way of Adam Rishon before the sin, of that way of the body being now able to become uplifted by the neshama to such an extent where now they could come together and reach heights that each one of them alone would not be able to reach. And that's what Tchias HaMesim is. And once that takes place, once the resurrection that takes place, that's forever. That's forever. And that's the purpose of creation. Until when the soul is disconnected from the body, that's not the tachlis, that's not the purpose of creation, and the neshama ultimately is waiting to come back down. It's waiting to come back down, and as much spiritual ecstasy it's experiencing up in Shemayim, it's waiting, it realizes in the depths of its soul, it realizes that it cannot reach what it can reach without the body. And it's waiting to come back down into this world after the resurrection of the dead. And that is the purpose of creation. That's the scenario of what we're happening. We go through this lifetime with a body that's very, very limited, very, very limited with what it can do and where it can take the neshama. Death comes and separates the body and soul. The body breaks down, and Tchias HaMesim means that the body will be reconstituted and rebuilt in a new way, or really in an old way of Adam Rishon before the sin, to allow, in that way, the body will become capable of uniting with the neshama to such an extent where they'll come together and elevate and become elevated to a level where the neshama is not able to do on its own. Not able to do on its own, and that's Tchias HaMesim, and that is forever. That is absolutely forever. Now, by the way, just one small thing on this side I just want to mention. Until that time comes where the resurrection of the dead will happen, until our bodies are reconstituted and rebuilt in that superior, more refined way of Adam Rishon before the sin, and then the neshama will become imbued back into the body, and they'll come together in an unbelievable level of attachment to Hashem beyond that which the neshama on its own could have done. Until that happens, as I mentioned, the neshama is in Shemayim after death, right? Until the body is built, the neshama is in a place. Again, the technical term for where it is held is called Olam HaNeshama, the world of souls. Again, the vernacular of our people, we call it Gan Eden. But it's really, again, that's obviously a spiritual place. It's called Olam HaNeshama. The truth is, the Ramchal writes this in a number of places, just a very interesting point. Ramchal says that there's really two things that's taking place in that world of Olam HaNeshama. Number one, it's just a place for the neshama to wait. Right? It's a place for the neshama to wait and to access information about Hashem and to learn about Hashem and to delight in Hashem's presence. it's nothing more than just basically a holding cell, an exceedingly exalted holding cell, but it's a holding cell. Says the Ramchal, however, that there's another aspect of what's taking place in the Olam HaNeshama. The Ramchal writes that he gives an example of a person. Let's say a person is very artistic. Let's say a person has a very strong artistic talent. But for whatever reason in his lifetime, he was never given the ability of expressing that inner talent. So the Ramchal writes, such a person has a very strong tendency of becoming a bitter person. Not being allowed to express one's inner talents is not just a question, it's not just that the world is now missing an artist. The person himself could become very bitter from such an experience. A person can become very, very darkened by not being allowed to express himself. So says the Ramchal, every single one of us going through our lifetimes, because of our Yetzirahs, because of our issues in life, we only tap into the power of our neshama to only a certain amount of to a small extent. Our neshama throughout our lifetimes is really being held back. It's not being allowed to really fully express itself. And says the Ramchal, the experience of the neshama in Gan Eden after death, or in the world of Olam HaNeshama, the world of souls, it's a therapeutic experience for the neshama, because this is the first time, and could be a very, very long time, where the neshama is fully allowed to express itself. And that's something very therapeutic for the neshama, and it's very healthy for the neshama, because it could go through 80, 120 years of being held back, of not really being allowed or given the opportunity to really express all of its koiches, of all of its talents, all of its dreams, and all of its yearning. And now, in the world of the neshama, in that world above, in Gan Eden, it's now fully able to express all the talents and all the koiches and all the desires that it had, that it was held back in this lifetime. And says the Ramchal, that's a very important step towards Tchias HaMesim, because just like the body has to be fixed, just like the body has to be reconstituted and rebuilt in a more refined way to allow it to become elevated to become one with the neshama, so too the neshama has to be healed from its, so to speak, psychological damage of being held back and not being allowed to express itself throughout its lifetime. And therefore, both body and soul during the time period of death are being fixed. The body is being fixed by being broken down and waiting to be reconstituted in a more refined way. And the soul in Gan Eden is being fixed by allowing itself to express itself, by allowing itself to rediscover its own nature. And that is a very, very important thing. So every single thing that a person goes through, again, in his lifetime and after the person's lifetime, it's all leading up to the ultimate goal, according to the Kabbalah, which is Tchias HaMesim, the resurrection of the dead, which, again, as I said, it's body and soul coming together, and the body being in a much more refined way than it is today. And when they come together, where the neshama, after expressing itself for so long in Gan Eden, and after the body being rebuilt in a more refined way, when these two powers come together, then the level that they can reach together in attachment to Hashem is infinitely greater than they can reach each one apart. And that is the ultimate purpose of creation, to attach oneself to Hashem, body and soul united. Okay, so I guess we'll stop with this and we'll open up for questions.
I just unmuted everybody. If you want to come in with a question from the phone, please go ahead. If not, I have one.
Can I ask a question? Can I ask a question?
Here.
Hello?
Yeah.
My question is, so far we learned the Ramban and the Rambam. Are there any other shitas?
So the truth is, there is generally speaking, this is how the opinions divide up between the Rambam and the Ramban, or the Mekubalim and the philosophers. There is a little bit of an in-between shita, which is the opinion of the Ritva. The Ritva writes in a number of places, in Rosh Hashanah and other Masechtas as well, that generally speaking, his worldview is that of the Ramban. But he does agree that before the ultimate Tchias HaMesim, there's going to be sort of a mini Tchias HaMesim of the Rambam. So he agrees. So in other words, he also feels that it's unfair, so to speak, for all those people that experience difficult lifetimes, for them never to have a Beis HaMikdash. You know what I mean? Rashi never saw the Beis HaMikdash, and that's not fair. The Rambam never saw the Beis HaMikdash, and that's not right. So therefore, says the Ritva, even before the ultimate Tchias HaMesim, which is in the world of the Ramban, this unbelievably elevated spiritual existence, says the Ritva, there's going to be a miniature version of Tchias HaMesim during the time period of Mashiach, which is just also very, very practical, just to allow all the tzaddikim and all those people that suffered in their lifetime to experience a happy and good life, and to see Mashiach, to see the salvation of the Jewish people, to see the Beis HaMikdash. So that would be, I guess, sort of an in-between opinion, but generally speaking, this is how the two camps divide between the Rambam and the Ramban. And as I said, historically speaking, specifically, again, this is something that we could talk about really a whole other series of discussion of how philosophy and how Kabbalah, how they interact with each other. But generally speaking, Jewish people have definitely accepted upon themselves the philosophy, the perspective of Kabbalah. There's no question about it. And this is something that the Jewish people really have accepted, the opinion of the Ramban and all those that followed him in his perspective.
Yeah, there's two questions. I'll use your mic because I don't want to shoot that.
Sure.
So one question is, first of all, how does the body differ the first time that when the body comes back as opposed to the body that we're used to now? How is that different?
Right. So the physical form of the body after the resurrection of the dead will still physically be the same makeup, meaning 2 arms, 2 legs, 2 eyes, and so on. And the reason for that is because, as the pasuk says, the Tselem Elokim Baras Adam, that the human form is exceedingly significant. The human form is a very, according to Kabbalah, every single limb of a human body is related to something that's happening in the higher world. It's very, very significant. So the form itself will be the same. The difference is going to be in the spiritual makeup of the body, how refined the body is going to be. And I don't mean like, Superman, that the body is going to be indestructible. But again, this is something that's difficult to really grasp people on our level. But the difference is going to be more in the spiritual side of the body. That the body is going to be rebuilt in such a way where the physical makeup of the body is not going to hold back, not going to block the light of the neshama. Not only will it not block the light of the neshama, it will absorb the light of the neshama to such an extent where the body and soul will become more of one entity than it is today. So that's really the difference between the two. And again, this is something that we'll also discuss, that after the Chitz Mason starts, this refinement of the body doesn't stop. It's not finished. It's a process that will go on and on for all eternity. And the Kabbalah do discuss what's going to happen in the year 7,000, 8,000, 9,000, and 10,000. They describe the differences that's going to happen, the refinement that's going to take place year after year after year. But after the year 10,000, even the Kabbalah say it's beyond their vision to really perceive what the world will, what level of refinement the body will experience after the year 10,000. But it goes on till infinity, because Hashem is infinite, and our ability to connect to Hashem, therefore, is infinite. But it's a question of refining the body more and more, of how much the body is able to absorb with the neshama and how one with the neshama the body can become. But the form itself will be the same.
So we'll look like what we look like.
We'll look like what we look like, 100%. You look like what you look like, but the whole world will be very different. The physical side of reality will be much more in tune with spirituality.
Yeah, and the other question was, and this might be a separate shir, is according to the vision of the Ramban and the Mukabalim, how does Mashiach interplay and Tchias HaMesim?
Yeah.
The Rambam, there was a very specific interplay. How does that interplay?
So like this. So in the world of the Mekubalim, Mashiach is a very, very important step in this process towards Tchias HaMesim. Because to go from a world that we have today, which is very, very physical and very coarse and full of impurity and full of problems, to go from that right away to this, world of Tchias HaMesim, of the resurrection of the dead, where physical life itself is more spiritual than we can imagine, that's something that's very, very difficult to happen in a second. So Mashiach is a very, very important bridge between these two worlds of Olam Hazeh and Olam Haba. And therefore, the Mekubalim do say that when Mashiach does come, again, how exactly Mashiach is going to come, like it should be today, right now, we should find out very clearly. But how exactly Mashiach does come? Is it miracles? Is it natural? What's the process of Mashiach? Again, that's something that, again, like W said, maybe that's something for another shir. But just generally speaking, Mashiach is that time period in the perspective of the Kabbalah as a bridge between this world and the next world, between Olam Hazeh and Tchias HaMesim. And therefore, and again, the reason is because Mashiach is having a Beis HaMikdash, having Mashiach, having the truth of Yiddishkeit become obvious to the entire planet, raises the world in a tremendous amount, in a tremendous way, and it gears the world towards that time period of Tchias HaMesim. And that's what the Mekubalim discuss. We have even in Chazal we find discussions about this. When will Tchias HaMesim take place? According to some, it's after Mashiach comes, or it could be 40 years after Mashiach comes. That's when the resurrection begins. Again, these things are not 100% set in stone. The Lashon, for example, writes in a number of places that these things are not set in stone. that theoretically could happen in a second. But generally speaking, the perspective of what it seems by the Mekubalim is that we have this world. Mashiach comes to elevate the world a tremendous amount, and that acts as a bridge towards getting to the next level, the ultimate level, which is the resurrection of the dead. And again, when exactly will that happen? Is it 40 years later, and so on? That there are different opinions, but Halavai, it should be very, very soon. And again, also, by the way, just on the side, how Tchias Mason will also take place. Again, maybe that's something we should discuss next time, and so on. We have to discuss also: are all Jewish people part of this? Is it possible for a Jew not to have Tchias Mason? Is it possible to lose your portion in Olam Haba? Is that possible as a Jew? The Goyim have a portion in this. These are all things that I guess over the coming weeks we'll discuss.
Okay, great. Thank you, and sorry for the change of day, and we'll pick it up again next week in Mitzvah Shem. I'm back on Wednesdays, okay? Thanks, everyone.
All right, thank you very much. Be well.
Toby?